of details. Night shift nurse needed, immediate hire, housing provided, high pay. She should have known something was off when the recruiter didn't ask for references, or when the cab that took her there refused to drive past the front gate. Hollowmere looked more like an abandoned asylum than a functioning hospital. Tall grey stone walls surrounded the property. The windows were narrow and barred, as if they were holding something in, rather than protecting the people inside. Fog clung to the lawn like it had nowhere else to go. The inside smelled of iodine, damp plaster, and something faintly metallic. The staff were few. Dr. Albrecht, an ancient-looking man with white eyes and a voice like creaking wood. Nurse Cheryl, who never looked Jessie in the eye. 2 orderlies who rarely spoke at all. And then the patients, or what they called patients. Some stayed in locked wings. Jessie was told not to enter. Others wandered the halls at odd hours, silent, barefoot, trailing IV lines that didn't connect to anything. But what disturbed Jessie the most were the whispers. She heard them every night around 3:13 a.m. Soft, urgent voices just out of reach. Sometimes they sounded like crying. Other times they called her name. "Jessie, come see. Jessie." She once followed the sound into the east wing and found herself staring at a wall, solid brick, no doors, no lights, just shadow, and oh, the shadows. They moved when nothing else did. They lingered behind corners. She'd catch a glimpse of someone tall, impossibly thin, gliding just out of frame in the security cameras. She once turned a corner and walked straight into a cold draft that smelled like soil and rot. Nothing there, but when she looked down, there were muddy footprints leading into the locked maternity ward, a ward that by all records hadn't been used in 30 years. Jessie tried to tell Cheryl about it one night, tried to ask casually, "Do you ever hear things around 3 a.m.? Cheryl paused for a moment, as if weighing her words, then simply said, "Don't answer them," and walked away. After that, no one spoke of the voices again. Some nights were worse than others. Full moons brought the whining, a high-pitched sound that vibrated through the vents and made Jessie's nose bleed. Other times the intercom would crackle to life and play music that wasn't on any station. A child humming, or an old piano song that skipped and distorted halfway through. Jessie started wearing headphones, but even with them on, she could feel the whispers like breath on her neck. She kept a journal to ground herself, noting each strange thing. Room 207 had a patient who never blinked. Room 304's window always looked out into a forest, even though that side of the hospital faced the parking lot. Every time she passed the elevator, it opened on its own and the buttons lit up for floors that didn't exist. And then came the 7th night. It began normally, if Hollowmere could ever be called that. Jessie was doing her rounds when she found a note slipped into her coat pocket. It was written in shaky red ink. "Don't leave at shift end. They come when the lights turn." She thought it was a prank until 5:59 a.m. As usual, the emergency lights flickered for the shift change, but this time they didn't come back on. Jessie stood frozen in the hallway as the fluorescent lights overhead clicked off one by one. First west wing, then east, then all went dark, and the silence, total, suffocating. Then came the voices, hundreds of them, screaming, whispering, laughing, crying from every direction. From inside the walls, Jessie ran. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. She passed the same door 3 times, a door labelled 000 with no knob and no keyhole. Behind it, something knocked, 3 short raps, then a long scrape. She ducked into a closet and shut the door. Inside, her breath came in clouds. She could hear something breathing just beyond the slats. When she opened her eyes again, it was morning. Light streamed in from the window. She was lying in her nurse's station chair, as if none of it had happened. Except the closet door was ajar, and muddy footprints led from it into the empty hallway. That was 3 nights ago. Jessie still works there, but she no longer questions the whispers, no longer follows the shadows. And every morning at shift end, she waits in the supply room until the lights come back on. She's learned to live with it. The pay's good. The patients mostly sleep. And besides, there's no leaving Hollowmere. Not really. Even if you walk out the front door. Because everyone who does eventually finds themselves right back where they started, waking up at dusk, putting on their scrubs, and hearing someone whisper their name in the dark.
Every evening at 6:06 sharp, the whistle blew at Renmar Factory. It wasn't a normal whistle, not the kind that made people check their watches and sigh in relief. No, this whistle was a shrill, dissonant thing, like metal screaming or a voice caught in a pipe. People in the nearby town swore they could hear it even when the wind blew the other way. They'd pause, just for a second, and mutter a prayer or knock on wood before moving on. Elijah Marr didn't mind it, at least. Not at first. He was grateful for the job. It had been a rough year, his wife gone, his savings nearly bled dry, and his pride packed away in boxes alongside her photo albums. So when Renmar Factory posted a quiet little flyer in the corner of the town diner reading help needed, no experience required, night shift, good pay, he didn't ask questions. He took the job. The factory was a massive, hulking structure on the outskirts of town, built long before anyone remembered who or what it was originally for. Its machines were older than Elijah and ran on patched wires, groaning belts, and a strange, foul-smelling lubricant they referred to only as the mix. Elijah's job was simple: keep the belts clear, pick out the things that weren't supposed to be there. He didn't ask where they came from. Sometimes it was just scraps. Other times, things that looked like teeth or clumps of hair caught in cogs. Once, he swore he saw a wedding ring spinning on the conveyor before it vanished into a chute labeled discard. He told himself it was all junk, maybe old garbage repurposed, recycled. Maybe they processed things from landfills. Maybe the other workers kept to themselves, pale-eyed, silent people who moved like they had lived 1,000 nights in this place. No names, no small talk, just a nod when he entered, and the sound of the machines droning louder than his own thoughts. The worst part, though, was the sound that came after the whistle. It happened just once a week. Thursday nights, Elijah would be mid-shift, sorting the bell, when everything would stop. The lights would flicker, and from somewhere deep below the factory floor, a deep thudding would begin, rhythmic and wet, like something heavy dragging itself across metal. Then the whispering would start, always behind him, always just out of reach. Closer, not yet ready. You hear it now, don't you? He thought he was going mad, but then he saw the others. They didn't flinch, they didn't react at all, just kept working, heads bowed, as if they didn't hear a thing. Or worse, maybe they did, and they just accepted it. One Thursday, Elijah didn't turn around. He'd learned that much. He stared at the belt, knuckles white, mouth dry. The whispering grew louder. more insistent then. Silence. When he looked up, the bell was still. The others were gone. A voice, loud and sudden, crackled over the old intercom. Level 7, cleared for entry. He had never heard of Level 7, and yet his feet moved on their own, down past the usual floor, past the steam-slick tunnels and rusted stairs, until he found a door. It didn't open with a key. It opened because it wanted him inside. What Elijah saw beyond the door, no one would believe. A room of mirrors, all showing him but not him. A version of himself with hollow eyes and a crooked smile. Working the belt with something squirming under his hands, and another watching the others, mouthing the words the whisper spoke, and another hanging limp from the ceiling like meat, eyes wide in eternal surprise. And the last mirror was empty until Elijah stepped in. He still works at Renmore, if you can call it that. The factory never stopped. The whistle still screams at 6:06. And now, sometimes, people say they see a new face on the line. One that looks just a bit too wide in the smile. One that whispers when it thinks no one is listening. So if you ever hear a job's open at the Renmore factory, don't ask questions. And for the love of God, don't go on a Thursday.